In 2006, Tony Trischka and Bela Fleck headlined the Banjo Summit at Eisenhower Auditorium. Now, Trischka and Fleck return to Penn State, this time with five-string wizards Bill Keith, Richie Stearns, Eric Weisberg, and Pete Wernick in Banjo Summit 2. Previews editor John Mark Raffis speaks with Trischka about what prompted him to take up the banjo and why he loves the instrument's distinctive sound. Trischka also talks about the five virtuoso pickers, each with a connection to New York, who will join him in concert.
I think it's safe to say that when most people think about the banjo, they probably think of something Southern and Appalachian, but the six musicians who are headlining this tour all have connections to New York State. How is it that so many great banjo players come from New York or have spent a substantial amount of time there?
Well, that's a good question. I'm not sure that it's necessarily New York State per se, but there is this northern tradition of banjo playing, of course. I think it's just because of other influences, as opposed to it being more of a regional thing. Like, I live in Alabama, and I saw Bill Monroe last year, which was 1954, and because Monroe didn't get up north very much in the early days. But then the people that were influenced, like myself, I got into it through the folk scare of the early 60s, the Kingston Trio, and then from there found bluegrass. Bela Fleck heard the Beverly Hillbillies, which was, the national media. I think it's just sort of different stories for everybody, but I think to some extent it's, as opposed to being first generation growing up, hearing Bill Monroe on the Grand Ole Opry in the 1940s or seeing him in the 50s or something like that, which is a more regionally based thing that's more the national media that brought it up north. And who can say why someone's attracted to play the banjo? It's just that sound. Yeah, I've interviewed many people about this sort of thing, other players. And, people just say, it's the sound. It's just got me excited because it's just fast. It's usually the fast aspects of it, or just that pointillistic sound of every one of those individual notes just crisp and sharp and exciting.
You mentioned that you came to it through the Kingston Trio in the early 1960s, and
Right.
you grew up in Syracuse, right?
Correct, uh-huh.
Had you played another instrument before the banjo, or was that what really ignited you into music?
Well, I'd played before, but it's the one that ignited me. A very accurate way of putting it. I started with flute and piano, classical lessons when I was a kid, and then I got into folk guitar, and I was finger picking and doing some flat picking, and Doc Watson had just really kind of hit the scene in a big way right around that time, around 1963, and so I was doing some of that, but some of this finger picking and flat picking stuff, but it was really, which was amazing. But then I heard the banjo, and that became an immediate passion, which it is to this day. So yeah, I was hearing the Kingston Trio. They had this song called Charlie and the MTA, and there was a banjo solo on there that just blew me away.
It's probably hard to think of an instrument that on first blush you think is more humble than the banjo, but then once you start taking a closer look, it's really an incredibly versatile instrument, as you would know much better than I do. And you are one of those banjo players that has taken full advantage of that. You certainly haven't just kept to traditional, old-timey music. You've played jazz, you've played classical, you've played a variety of different musics, as has Bela Fleck. What is it about the banjo that lends itself to so many directions?
It's a musical instrument. I'm not saying that facetiously, but because so many people historically have pigeonholed it as it's this bluegrass instrument or a Southern Appalachian kind of an instrument, which is a very powerful thing. But it's just as people started expanding horizons. I grew up playing classical piano, so it was a natural thing for me to see, okay, what else can you do with this? And I worked up like a Bach two-part invention that I might have actually played with Bela at Penn State. Like we would each play one hand of the piano on the banjo.
I'm going to put you on the spot again. I'm going to run down the headliners for the Penn State concert, and if you could give me just a brief thumbnail of what that particular musician brings to the table. What does Bill Keith bring to this concert?
He brings a wonderful sensibility. He can do straight-ahead bluegrass, note for note, the way Earl Scruggs used to do it. It's hard to say past tense. And then he also has this jazz chordal sensibility, and he's a major, major, major innovator in banjo playing. So he brings a huge amount.
Yeah, he's often referred to as a trailblazer of melodic playing. When we talk about melodic playing, what are we really talking about there?
Scruggs style is based more on chords. Melodic style is based on scales, and allows you to play fiddle tunes, let's say, note for note, the way the fiddle would play it, which was one of the things that really excited Bill Monroe about having Bill Keith in his band back in 1963.
Richie Stearns from Ithaca is well known as being part of the Horseflies, which coincidentally just played here in Center County in August at a club, brew pub. Richie Stearns, old-time clawhammer.
Old-time clawhammer, but not strictly. He does all sorts of other things as well. And I was in a band with him for, I don't know, about a year called Farm Report in the early 90s, and I could just see him stretching things, doing more rock. He sort of has almost, I don't know if he would agree with this, but almost sort of like a punk spin. Even though he's doing clawhammer, he's got this more edgy kind of a thing. Not that old-time music can't be edgy, but even though clawhammer is percussive, an even more percussive aspect to it, which just sets him apart from it, makes him completely unique as far as I'm concerned.
And just about everybody, whether they know it or not, has heard Eric Weisberg because of his most famous performance of dueling banjos for the Deliverance soundtrack.
The very first banjo lesson I ever took, I was taught Eric's version of Lonesome Road Blues, which was on his very, for me, influential album called Folk Banjo Styles back in the early 60s. And he, sort of, his dominion was the studio for many, many years in New York City. And because of that, a lot of people would hear him on cornflakes commercials or dueling banjos. And so I think he was kind of the subterranean voice of the banjo on a very national and I suppose international level. Subliminal level, people are hearing Eric Weisberg playing on so many sessions. But he, of course, had the hit, which he didn't even know was out, of dueling banjos. A friend said, "Hey, I heard you on the radio." And unbeknownst to him, Warner Brothers had released that song as a single for whatever reason.
Pete Wernick it goes by the handle of Dr. Banjo, I'm sure because he's a great banjo player, but also because he has a PhD in sociology.
He was with a group, and still is with a group called Hot Rise, R-I-Z-E, and a very influential bluegrass group and very entertaining, kind of going back to the old days. And so they're just a great voice of bluegrass, spreading the gospel of bluegrass. Besides the Pete Seeger book, he was the first person to write a very influential and major book on bluegrass banjo, instruction book on bluegrass banjo, which a lot of people read. I mean, he sold hundreds of thousands of copies of that. And so he's had a big influence in the instructional end of things, but still tours and plays with Hot Rise, and was very important in my career because the very first recording I was on was with him with this group called Country Cooking in the early 70s. And he was the first person to approach Rounder Records on my behalf, suggesting that I should do a solo album, which they agreed to do. So thanks to Pete, in many ways, I got to do that. Plus, he was the one that talked the publishing company to allow me to write a book. So, major aspects of my career were initiated by Pete.
Do you remember the first time you met Bela Fleck?
Yeah, he was 16 years old and came to me for lessons, and he was already playing bluegrass. But my first album had come out, and he was interested in learning some of those tunes and getting into some wacky banjo stuff. So I showed him the tunes and showed him some of my techniques for improvisation, that sort of thing. And excuse me, and within a very short period of time, it became obvious that this guy was going to take it all the way and didn't really need more lessons, and we just kind of hung out and played banjo together.
Tickets are on sale for Banjo Summit 2, November 1st, 2012 at Penn State's Eisenhower Auditorium. Order online at www.cpa.psu.edu or by phone at 1-800-ARTS-TIX.